Now, I happen to believe that there is a spectrum of people from totally gay to totally straight and gradations in between, but very few people could answer the question, very few straight people could answer the question, when did you decide that you were straight or to be straight?
For example, and just in response to the items that you just raised, the issue about changeability. I read the entire decision of Kerrigan of the Connecticut Supreme Court, and they threw the whole kitchen sink on the immutability question, the suspect class question. And in the middle of that, and I can't quote it offhand, but it's there, in the middle of that is a statement that says, well, even though there's no evidence that sexual orientation is fixed, we believe it is. This is the whole thing. This is a faith without substance. So the burden of proof has to come if we're going to treat homosexuals as a specific civil rights class. They need to demonstrate that they are a specific civil rights class, that it's not changeable. This is how all suspect class determinations were dealt with from 1964 until the present. And yet, in all three decisions, it was amazing to see how they changed this perspective.
You were saying that homosexuality is not a decision. Then, yes or no, is bisexuality a choice, or is it now heterosexual, homosexual, and bisexuals?
I think judging all different sexualities is a bit above my pay grade and those of everyone else here. Okay. We all have our opinions. It's based on our religion. It's based on our experience. It's based on our personal view. I happen, yes, to believe that some people are completely homosexual and some completely heterosexual, and that there are gradations in between.
Okay.
Arline, you gave this to me. Above my pay grade. It reminds me of somebody who said the same thing not long ago when it comes to human abortion. Well, I'll tell you something. If you are leading the Massachusetts Gay and Lesbian Political Caucus, I think that is part of your pay grade. To be able to define what is transgender, because that's part of the GLBC, gay, lesbian, bisexual, what's the other one, coalition, and transgendered, and so forth. And the bottom line is, it comes down to subjective decision. A subjective identity cannot be a class of people.
Clearly, I was being a bit flip when I said it was above my pay grade, because I was trying to not be distracted from the conversation at hand to get into particulars of people's sexuality. And my answer really is, in fact, the one that I gave second, which was that I believe there is a gradation between totally heterosexual and totally homosexual. And the question is, how does one act it out? Do they hide it? Do they lie about it? Do they pretend they're not who they are because it'll make other people like them more or feel better about them or approve of them? Or do they be who they think they are as best as they can be?
And here's my question for you. Can you name me any scientific data that, for example, I went through a list of the whole range of identities and changeabilities. There are many people who are same-sex married homosexuals who went through 1, 2, or 3 divorces heterosexually or had long heterosexual histories. Maybe very few have been avowedly homosexual their whole lives. And people change in and out. In fact, if you look at the data, more people leave homosexual seasons in their lives and become heterosexual than people successfully leave alcoholism. And so even if you quibbled about the data and the ratio, you've got change coming in every direction. And so I would like to know if there's anything in science that says you're genetically wired, particularly when homosexuality is described as feelings for another person. Are not feelings subjective? So my question is, can you name for me any scientific data that homosexuality is a fixed trait?
I cannot cite scientific studies, but mostly it's because I don't bother learning what the scientific studies are, because to me in the work I do in politics, they're irrelevant. Because I can name studies, and then he can name studies, and you choose to believe the studies you want to believe. There is an increasing body of evidence, generically, that move in the direction of showing that we are what we are due to DNA, not to DAD, not to DAD. But for me to sit inside a study, I don't think moves forward the conversation in a particularly effective manner.
But could I just intervene then and say, okay, fair enough. If the Kerrigan Supreme Court decision, which labored many pages with a lot of citations on the suspect class definition, and you've got the finest legal minds and the finest studies being presented before them, when they can't cite any evidence, does that not lead us to the question that we're dealing with subjective definitions? And if you deal with subjective definitions in one subjective class, you can deal with it in any class. And then the other element is immutability. And that argument has not been overcome, and Arline basically has agreed with me on that one too. There is a gradation. If there's a gradation, there could be 1,000 other gradations for 1,000 other classes who claim rights based on their class.